What are you doing here? This is a high-end residential area. We live in that luxury apartment building over there. This area isn't for people like you. I couldn't believe I ran into him again, the man who left me for a younger, wealthier woman. And now, here they were, both looking down on me again. You're still as plain and poor as ever, huh? Oh, by the way, I make over $100,000 a year now. Over $100,000? That must be tough. The unexpected comment came from my husband. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 28 years old and work at a company that deals with ceramics. My love for ceramics began during a family trip in middle school, when we stopped by a pottery market that my mother adored. Now, I'm lucky to have turned that passion into my career. I used to think it was fine to stay single forever, but life has a funny way of surprising you. I got involved in a town revitalization project through a pottery market where I met Tom, who worked at an event planning company. We started dating. Emily works hard and respects my job. I feel like I can build a stable life with her. That's what he used to say, and I also thought we could make it work. Even after getting married, since I had no intention of quitting my job. Tom's job required him to travel a lot for events, and he was often busy on weekends. My job was similar, with the occasional need to work on weekends due to the kiln schedule. It was tough not being able to meet up on our days off. And sometimes plans got canceled at the last minute, but I thought it was all part of the deal. I was too naive. Tom started canceling plans more frequently, even skipping our wedding planning meetings. Unlike before, he stopped answering his phone. One day, after finishing a meeting, I was heading towards the station when I spotted Tom on the opposite sidewalk. Wow, what a coincidence! I thought we could have dinner together since I could head home early today. As soon as the light turned green, I rushed across the street to catch up with him. Tom. Finished with work? Want to grab dinner? Huh? Standing next to Tom was a tall, stunning woman. And they both turned to look at me at the same time. Her arm was tightly wrapped around his. Emily. What are you doing here? What a coincidence. I had a meeting nearby, just finished. Are you still working? Who's this? It didn't seem like a work situation at all, but I tried to stay calm. I knew Tom often worked with promotional models at events. Oh, this is Catherine, she's a model. Hello. She smiled brightly at me. Wow, she's gorgeous and has a great figure. Of course, she's a model. So, it must be work-related. I felt a bit relieved. Although, I wasn't thrilled about them linking arms, she hadn't let go at all. But maybe it's just normal for someone in her line of work? Hello. I'm Emily Johnson, Tom's fiancée. As I introduced myself, Tom suddenly looked as if he had bitten into something sour. And Catherine glanced between us before bursting into laughter. Wait, this is your fiancé? Oh my gosh, I can't believe we ran into each other, Tommy. Tommy? Come on, I told you to sort this out already. Might as well do it now. Nodding at her words, he turned to me. Emily, listen, I'm with Catherine now. What? I'm sorry, but I want to call off the engagement. I'm going to marry Catherine. What? Wait, what are you saying, Tom? I met Catherine at an outdoor festival event, and we just instantly felt like it was fate. Sorry. But it was Tommy who insisted he'd break up with his girlfriend for me. She said it so casually. So, thanks for everything up until now. Wait, Tom. At least let's have a proper talk. But there's really nothing left to talk about. What? My mind's already made up. Catherine is cute, has a great figure, and is honestly amazing. She's only 24 and comes from a wealthy family. Oh, Tommy, it's just because my dad is the CEO. Anyway, I'm going to marry Catherine and become part of her family. What? Are you quitting your job too? I thought you liked your job. Catherine asked me to. Plus, it'll be more profitable than my current job. Oh, and make sure to cancel the wedding venue. Don't worry, I'll cover the cancellation fees since it's my decision. Oh, Tommy, you're so responsible. I just can't wait to be with Catherine. You're so cool. I struggled to keep from collapsing. It was clear that no matter what I said, it wouldn't change anything. Tom was completely smitten, just like Catherine said. All right. I managed to force out the words. I can't cry, not here, not in front of these people. Well, see ya. Good luck with your ceramics work. What's that supposed to mean? The two of them walked off, arms linked, laughing together. 2 years have passed since I broke up with Tom. Now, at 30, I'm still fully dedicated to my work. Looking back, I don't miss him at all. In fact, I consider myself lucky that I didn't have to deal with his infidelity after marriage. Seeing my newly designed ceramics fresh out of the kiln gave me a boost of energy. And there was someone who had been watching over me, Robert Black. A craftsman I've worked with for years. I always thought his mind was entirely focused on pottery. So, when he asked me out and confessed his feelings on the third date, I was taken aback. I had always admired him as a craftsman, so I was genuinely happy. But with the trauma I had been through, I couldn't easily dive into another relationship. I decided to be completely honest with him. When I was engaged, I had announced it to everyone at the company and among the kiln workers. So he knew about the breakup too. He listened quietly, then gave me his usual gentle smile. That must have been really hard for you. Yes. When I heard you were getting married, I was really shocked. But I figured it was only natural for someone as wonderful as you to have a partner. And I blamed myself for not making a move sooner. What? I hadn't expected to hear that. When you told me that the engagement was off and forced a smile, I wanted to be there for you immediately, but I knew you needed time. So I focused on my work, hoping that creating beautiful pottery would help lift your spirits. You've been thinking of me for that long. And believe it or not, I'm actually quite popular. Huh? Maybe it's because my grandfather is wealthy. But I've had my fair share of attention from some very beautiful women. Yet, I never felt a spark. I'd much rather spend my time working with clay. I see. He wasn't bragging or joking, he said it all in a straightforward, serious tone. As I was thinking about how sincere he was, he looked directly at me. Emily, you're the first person I've ever wanted to make happy. I felt a mix of wanting to laugh and a warm feeling spreading through my heart. With him, I felt like everything would be okay. Before I knew it, I was saying, thank you. I'd be happy to be with you. A year later, Robert and I got married. Everyone at the company and the kiln celebrated our union. To continue working, we decided to live in 2 locations after getting married. One was his family's home near the kiln. I had heard his grandfather was wealthy. But I was shocked when I saw the grand estate they owned. We live in one corner of that estate. We often talk about how, in the future, I might leave my job to work with him at the kiln and live there permanently. The other place is a rented apartment in the city, close to my office. The apartment is still sparsely furnished. So today we decided to visit a nearby furniture store together. There, we had an unexpected encounter, not a pleasant one. While browsing the sofa section, a voice called out from behind us. "Hey, isn't that you, Emily, the plain girl?" Tom. More than 3 years had passed, but there was no forgetting my ex-fiancé, Tom. And standing next to him was his model wife, Catherine. I knew they had married after our breakup. She had been flaunting it on social media and in magazines. But Catherine looked different somehow, less attractive, with a harsher expression. I realized I hadn't seen her in the media lately either. Tom, too, was smirking, but his face lacked its former vigor. "This is a high-end residential area. What are you doing here? Oh, do you need a permit to shop in this upscale area? No way, you don't live around here, do you? This store is expensive, you know, not a place for someone like you. Yeah, you still look as plain and poor as ever. Just like the color of that clay you love so much." I hadn't expected any apologies for the past, but their condescending attitude was exhausting. "Yeah, having someone as dull as you hanging around here will drag down the store's reputation. People might mistake us for poor folks. Did you come all the way here? By the way, we live in that famous luxury tower over there. On the 25th floor, no less." Their bragging, even though I hadn't asked, irritated me. But responding would have been a waste of time. I kept silent. My lack of response seemed to annoy Tom, who continued to pester me. "You still going on about how much you love pottery? With those shabby clothes. Oh, by the way, I'm making over $100,000 a year." He moved into my luxury apartment as my live-in husband. Just for me. Over $100,000? That must be tough. What? The sudden comment came from Robert, catching even me by surprise. We both spoke up at the same time, shocked by these obnoxious people. "I can't help but worry about your financial situation, even though it's none of my business." "Who's this guy?" Tom asked, finally noticing my husband. "Nice to meet you, I'm Robert Black. It seems my wife Emily was in your care in the past." For a moment, both Tom and Catherine looked surprised. But then they sneered, looking Robert up and down. "So, you actually got married, huh? Well, you two are perfect for each other, plain and boring." "Yeah, he looks like he's in a daze. I didn't even notice he was here. And what was that about tough, just now?" Tom glared at Robert. "Oh, well, you said you live on the 25th floor of that tower and make over $100,000 a year, right?" "That's right, over $100,000. Tom puffed out his chest. "And with all those brand name items you're wearing. I couldn't help but worry about your financial situation, even though it's none of my business. You're just bitter and talking nonsense because you're poor. Sorry to disappoint you, but we're doing just fine." "Is that so? By the way, is your wife feeling all right?" "She doesn't look well." "What?" "Hey, Catherine, are you okay?" "It's nothing. You probably can't comprehend a figure like over $100,000 a year. What about you? Earning $10 an hour?" "No, it's not hourly. I'm not employed by a company, I stay at home." Are you serious?" "Anit? I knew it. She probably just married you to become a cash cow." "Wait, that's not." "Stop mocking my dear Emily. Trying to defend her, huh? Gotta do your part as a freeloading husband, I guess. And he calls his own wife my dear Emily. What a weirdo. The two of them continued to look down on us, completely misunderstanding the situation. Emily, let's go. Dealing with these people who have no future will only cause trouble. Yes, let's leave quickly. Robert took my hand and we walked away. Talk about sour grapes. Don't come back here again. Yeah, stop pretending you belong in this neighborhood. But we do live in the President Tower, you know. When Robert answered, they burst out laughing. Lying to cover up your embarrassment. That's such an obvious lie. Everyone knows that name. It's the most famous and expensive building in the area. There's no way any ET could afford to live there. Ignoring their loud laughter, we walked away. I can't believe we ran into them here. I'm so sorry, Robert. I apologized as we walked. No, I should apologize for being so forward, worrying about their financial situation. I guess this is why people say I'm bad at reading the room. Ha! I nearly burst out laughing at my husband's usual seriousness. That's not the issue, clearly, the rude ones were them. But they do live nearby, huh? I really hope we don't run into them again. Our apartment is also in this neighborhood. Their tower was one of our options. But I'm so glad we didn't choose it. Robert responded. Don't worry, they won't be around for long. Huh? I heard that the woman's family is wealthy. Do you know her last name? Huh? I had no idea what Robert meant, so I just stared at him blankly. A few days later, as Robert and I were leaving the building, we suddenly heard voices. There they are. They really do live here. Tom and Catherine appeared in front of us, and I was taken aback. What are you doing here? Please, help us. What? They're kicking us out of the tower. Oh. And why is that? Rent arrears. You were behind on rent? Well, that's understandable then. This really had nothing to do with us. Wait. They had been giving us more time. But suddenly they said they couldn't wait any longer, and it's all because of your husband. Catherine suddenly shouted. Why would that be my husband's fault? When they mentioned the name Black. Your husband turned out to be the owner of that tower. She looked furious, her face red with anger. It's not me, it's my father. What? It originally belonged to my grandfather, but it's in my father's name now. Either way, it doesn't matter. The management company said that if we don't pay up immediately, they'll start the eviction process. That's only natural. It's not a charity. What? That's why I said it must be tough making over $100,000 a year. What do you mean? Tom shouted. Making over $100,000 for a couple should allow for a comfortable lifestyle. But if you're living on the 25th floor of that tower, with a rent of $5,000 a month, surely you haven't forgotten about taxes, have you? What? And on top of that, you're indulging in luxury brands. It's no wonder you're drowning in debt. What? Catherine, you're the one who insisted on living there. When did the rent fall behind? I had to maintain relationships with people on the upper floors. High-end lunches, spa treatments, expensive bags, and jewelry are necessary to be taken seriously. You don't have to keep up with those people. Huh? Is it really that important to put on a show, even if it means going into debt? Debt. Tom shouted, genuinely shocked. Did he really not know? How could you be behind on rent and also in debt? What were you thinking? I had to be at the top of the social ladder. I can't afford to look shabby, especially as a model. You're hardly getting any modeling work anymore. I thought so. That explains why I haven't seen her around lately. That industry must be tough. New, younger faces keep popping up one after another. I murmured, and Catherine glared at me with a look of fury. Shut up, you plain girl. Damn it, what the hell, Catherine? You said you'd take care of the finances. And now you tell me you haven't even been paying the rent. But didn't you say her family is wealthy? You boasted about it, right? Why not just ask them for help? I offered a suggestion, albeit sarcastically, but with a hint of kindness. But Emily, her family's business has been struggling since last year. They don't have the extra money. What? That's probably why they couldn't pay the rent. They might have been relying on her family for support until now. Wait. How do you know about my dad's company? My grandfather is the chairman of the Black Corporation. What? The Black Corporation. A true, born wealthy individual. Tom muttered in a daze. My family used to do business with your father's company. But we don't have any dealings with them now. Robert continued calmly. My grandfather owns many properties, both in the U.S. and abroad. Then why didn't you say that the last time we met? It's not something I would bring up on my own. It would be improper. What? Are you trying to insult me? That wasn't my intention, but perhaps it ended up that way. This is so infuriating. I'm really sorry. Don't apologize with that tone. This was like a comedy sketch. As their argument gained rhythm, I was about to laugh when Catherine snapped at us. But it's not your money, is it? You're just leeching off your grandfather's wealth, just like I thought. I decided to set the record straight. Robert is a renowned potter. What? These days, customers are willing to wait months for his pieces. At the same time, he works with the kiln to produce more affordable items so that more people can enjoy his work. They sell out online every time. Wah! My husband has never relied on his grandfather's money. Don't compare him to yourself. My grandfather always says he's there to help if we ever need it, though. Robert chuckled and then turned serious as he looked at Tom and Catherine. As stated in the contract, if rent is overdue by 3 months, the lease is terminated. And eviction proceedings begin. If there's still no payment, forced eviction occurs within 2 to 3 months. The contract for that tower specifies this clearly. They waited 5 months because they believed your wife's story. What? She claimed that her husband's illness had reduced their income and begged for more time. What the hell, Catherine? What were you doing? But that was a complete lie. You were actually racking up debt while living lavishly. I reported this to my father and grandfather. Why the hell do you know about our debts? Tom was pale, and Catherine was nearly in tears. I investigated. Robert said calmly. I knew about your past from Emily. But we're happy now, so running into you by chance was just that, chance. Then that should be fine. But what did you say to Emily when you met? No apologies, just insults and disdain. That's unforgivable. No way. And I was genuinely concerned. You said you were living in that tower on an income of $100,000 a year. What? At least now you've realized the situation before your debts got any worse. Robert smiled as he spoke, leaving Tom and Catherine speechless, their mouths agape. What the hell is with this innocent rich boy? I was impressed by the apt description. Robert wasn't being sarcastic, he was just stating the facts. Maybe it's because he's born into wealth, or perhaps it's just his personality. I think it's the latter. Hey, Emily, please help us. We're sorry. Yeah, if you ask, he might do something. Wow, talk about a sudden change in attitude. I refuse. I smiled sweetly, imitating Robert's tone. Though my smile was far from innocent, it was quite the opposite. Your debts are none of my concern. Exactly. Emily, let's go. Wait. Don't just smile and cut us off like that. Ignoring their desperate cries, I walked away hand in hand with Robert. After that, Tom and Catherine were, of course, evicted from the tower. Catherine's father paid the overdue rent, but in exchange, he disowned her. With their family business in crisis, Catherine's parents were furious with her for squandering money to keep up appearances. And they made it clear she wasn't welcome until she paid back both the debts and the rent. Tom, fed up with her behavior, is reportedly in the midst of divorce proceedings. But considering he indulged her and left all the financial management to her, I'd say he's at least half to blame. Catherine, on the other hand, had borrowed money from shady sources without her family or Tom knowing. And now she's being chased by debt collectors. As for Robert and me, our new dinnerware line is doing well. And today we're at the kiln discussing our next designs. We want to gradually expand the range to include items for families, couples, and even individuals enjoying some personal relaxation time. Emily, what do you think about the color here? Can you take a look? Sure. And someday, when we have children, I want us all to sit down and eat together with the dishes Robert has crafted. Surrounded by the scent of clay, we continue working in the studio we love.
You've got to be joking. The problem is with you. Why haven't you settled the payment for the accommodation? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. Because you're the one who left me. My husband shot back. Just bring the money here, I demanded. I'm not going to do that. I'm the one who was left behind, he said coldly. I didn't even want to go on that trip in the first place. This was just another day in our troubled marriage. My husband and I have been married for 7 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter who is the light of my life. Watching her grow, laugh, and discover the world has been the best part of every single day. But sadly, my relationship with my husband has been falling apart. When my daughter turned 1, I decided to quit my job. It wasn't an easy decision, but I wanted to be there for her as she grew. However, instead of supporting me, my husband made it clear that if I wasn't working, I had to take care of all the housework by myself. So I did it all. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of our baby without any help. When she was a newborn, I barely got any sleep. It was exhausting. I remember one night feeling so drained that I asked my husband to help. His response shocked me. If you don't like it, I can divorce you anytime, he said without hesitation. He even showed me a set of completed divorce papers. He put them in the drawer right in front of me, as if to remind me that he could leave whenever he wanted. After that, whenever we had an argument, he would pull out those papers and mention divorce, with a disgusted look on his face. And then there's my mother-in-law, the person who raised him to think this way. She's just like him, controlling and critical. She comes over to our house whenever she wants, without asking. One day, she visited unannounced, opened the fridge, and started eating my daughter's yogurt without even asking. But that wasn't the worst of it. Whenever she came over, she would lecture me endlessly about how a proper wife should behave. She'd even inspect the corners of my house for dust and criticize me if she found any. Today, she came over again. I have good news for you, she said with a big smile. I didn't trust her at all. What is it? I asked cautiously. What's wrong with you? You should look happier when I'm bringing good news, she snapped. You're so ungrateful, just like my son says. Okay, what's the news? I asked, forcing myself to stay calm. We're going on a trip, she announced proudly. Where to? I asked, confused. It's your job as the unemployed one to figure that out, she said with a smirk. Honestly, you're really not very smart, are you? It's such a shame. And just like that, she left me feeling small and defeated once again. I have a surprise for my son, who works so hard all the time, my mother-in-law announced, looking pleased with herself. A surprise? I asked, unsure what she meant.
Yes.
Let's help him relax and leave behind all his tiredness, she said with a smile. But something in her tone made me feel uneasy. It didn't take long for me to figure out what she meant. My mother-in-law wanted to take her son, my husband, on a trip. The problem? She didn't want to pay for it herself. Instead, she had come up with a plan to invite me and my daughter along. And guess what? She wanted me to cover the entire cost of the trip. Who would want to go on such a trip?
Certainly not me.
Besides, we simply couldn't afford it. Let's make it a grand trip, she added cheerfully, acting as if money wasn't an issue.
No.
I never said I was going, I replied firmly. Let me think about this for a while, I added, trying to end the conversation without upsetting her further. That evening, my husband came home from work in a terrible mood. I immediately knew why. My mother-in-law must have called him and told him about our conversation. I heard you disobeyed my mother today, he said, confronting me as soon as he stepped through the door. I was just telling her the truth, I replied, feeling defensive. What truth? That we can't take her on vacation, he asked, his voice rising. That's right. We don't have that kind of money, I admitted, feeling the heavy weight of our financial situation pressing down on me. But he wasn't ready to listen. My mother said it was a surprise. She already told me about the trip. What's the surprise in this? I asked, frustrated. If we can't manage our finances, how are we supposed to afford a trip? It's your fault we can't manage the money, he snapped. How am I supposed to manage money that we don't even have? I shot back. Are you trying to say that I don't make enough? He asked, clearly offended. Well, it's not exactly much, I said, unable to hold back my honesty. You've got to be kidding me, he grumbled. Anyway, I'm going on this trip. You need to plan everything. That's an order. And if you can't do it, we're getting a divorce. His words cut deep. I felt my heart sink. I might as well get a divorce now, I muttered quietly under my breath. But as frustrated as I was, one thought kept me from saying more. What will my daughter think? She was the only reason I hadn't walked away already. In the end, I found myself searching for hotels and trying to plan the trip, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I wasn't even sure about going on the trip, but my mother-in-law kept insisting. After talking with my husband, she became even pickier about her demands. I want a room with an open-air bathtub, she declared, and the meals must be the most luxurious ones at the hotel. Her requests seemed endless, and I couldn't help but wonder how much all of this would cost. But if I didn't meet her demands, I knew what would happen. I'd be met with another storm of sarcasm and criticism. It felt like I had no choice but to give in, even though it frustrated me deeply. Finally, I decided to take a bold step. I shamelessly went ahead and fulfilled all of her requests, but the way I managed it wasn't something she expected. When my mother-in-law found out everything was arranged just the way she wanted, she became oddly tense and annoyed. This is all thanks to my mom, she said, saying something that didn't make much sense. But I ignored it. That evening during dinner, my husband started one of his usual lectures. He had this habit of scolding me over the smallest things, but after 5 years of dealing with it, I had become almost immune. I let him talk and didn't even bother responding. Thankfully, he never used sarcasm or harsh words in front of our daughter. It seemed like he didn't want her to see that side of him, which gave me some relief. The day of the trip finally came. I found myself sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. Of course, I was the one who rented the car and, naturally, the one doing all the driving. My husband sat comfortably in the passenger seat, acting like he owned the car. In the back seat, My mother-in-law kept talking to herself about souvenirs she wanted to buy, completely ignoring my daughter, who was trying to get her attention. I drove all morning without a single offer of help from either of them. No one asked if I needed a break or if I was tired. Finally, we stopped at a service area because my daughter needed to use the restroom. I quickly took her, relieved for a moment to stretch my legs, and hurried back to the parking lot. But when we returned, the car was gone. I froze, my heart pounding as I looked around the lot. The car was nowhere to be seen. Feeling panicked, I called my husband. He didn't pick up. Next, I tried calling my mother-in-law. "You two took too long," she said with a laugh, her tone cold and uncaring. So we left. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had actually left us behind. I tried to explain what had happened, but she wasn't interested. It was clear they had no intention of coming back for us. I stood there holding my daughter's hand, wondering what I was going to do next. I had only gone to the bathroom for a few minutes, but when I called my husband to find out why he left, his voice cut through the phone with anger. "This is your fault," he said coldly. "You don't listen to me. You have no right to go on this trip. Was this your plan all along? If so, what now?" I felt my heart sink, but he wasn't done. "I'm fine, but what about Jane? She's turning out just like you, too cocky. She even talked back to my mom when she complained about you. She needs to be punished too." I was stunned. My daughter, Jane, had only stood up for me, and now he wanted to punish her for that. But he added, "Since she was looking forward to this trip, I might think about it again when you both apologize. If you understand, you can go home now." Before I could respond, he hung up the phone. I stood there in shock, holding the phone in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other. What was I supposed to do now? I realized how far we were from home. "Mom, are you okay? Did Dad and Grandma leave us?" Jane asked, her small voice breaking the tense silence. I knelt down to her level and forced a smile. "I guess so, sweetheart. They're so mean, aren't they?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so too," I said softly. "Are we going home?" she asked, tilting her head. I hesitated.
Yes.
"But you were really looking forward to this trip?" She smiled sweetly. "Only because I was with you, Mom. If you're going home, I'll go home too." Her words warmed my heart. "Then let's go on adventure instead," I said, trying to make the best of the situation. "An adventure?" Jane's eyes lit up, her carefree smile bringing me a sense of peace. I called my friend Millie, who lived nearby, and told her everything that had happened. Without hesitation, she came to pick us up and drove us home. Later that evening, after Jane had fallen asleep, Millie and I sat down to talk. "So, what are you going to do now?" Millie asked, concern in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "I think I'm getting a divorce." Millie nodded. "That's a good decision. You've put up with this for far too long." "Yeah," I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. "And I don't want Jane to grow up with a father who harms her emotionally anymore." The next morning, I signed the divorce papers that had been sitting in the drawer for years. Millie filled in the witness box, and, ironically, my mother-in-law's name was already written in the other box. Thanks to that, I was able to file the papers immediately. 5 days after returning home, my phone rang. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After dropping my daughter off at kindergarten, I got a call from my husband. His tone was sharp and angry. "You've got to be kidding me. You're the one causing all the problems. Why haven't you paid for the hotel accommodation?" he demanded. "Because you're the one who left me behind," I shot back. "You should have paid for it in advance." "Oh, really?" he sneered. "And why does it cost $10,000? That's ridiculous." "It costs that much because it includes all the special requests your dear mother made," I replied sarcastically. "You and your mother had a great time there, so why don't you split it? That would be $6,000 each." There was silence for a moment, and then I heard a woman's voice in the background. She sounded frustrated, likely someone from the hotel asking for payment. "I'll call the police if you don't pay," the woman warned. "No problem," my husband responded smugly. "My wife will pay. She's on her way here right now." The woman's voice grew colder. "Where is your wife now?" she asked. "At home," my husband answered casually. The woman's tone sharpened. I checked her address, and it seems like your wife is far from home. Didn't you leave her at a service area, and now you're telling her to come and pay? My heart swelled with gratitude when I realized who the woman was. She continued, her voice now directed at him. Excuse me, your wife and I have been friends since high school. I was the one who picked her and your daughter up from the service area after you abandoned them. She was Millie, my old friend, and someone I could always count on. I had called her when I was stranded, asking for help with the trip. What I didn't know was that Millie owned a hotel. When I explained my situation, she surprised me by offering us her hotel accommodation for free. You don't have to worry about paying, Millie had told me at the time. It's the least I can do for you. I was shocked. Back in high school, Millie had struggled with her future. Her family owned a well-known hotel, but she had different dreams. As the only daughter, she felt obligated to take over the business even though it wasn't what she wanted. I had been her shoulder to lean on, encouraging her to follow her heart. Though she ended up managing the hotel, she told me she never forgot how much I supported her during that difficult time. She felt like she owed me a favor and saw this as the perfect opportunity to repay me. I told your husband there's no payment needed, Millie said firmly, but he clearly doesn't care about you. I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. Millie's kindness reminded me that there were still good people in my life, even as I prepared to let go of my marriage. I don't have a personal connection with you, Millie said firmly. In other words, you're just hotel guests. Since you're only guests, I'd like you to pay the full price for your stay. My husband, caught off guard, tried to argue. All right, look, why don't you put it on your credit card for now, and I'll charge it to my wife later? Millie wasn't having it. I don't want to do that, she replied calmly. It's not that you don't want to, Millie added with a sharp tone. It's that you can't. Isn't that right? My husband's face went pale. Wait, what do you mean? He stammered. Well, Millie explained, your salary is $3,500 a month, and your credit card limit can't be more than $6,000. Isn't that correct? My husband stood frozen, unable to respond. Millie turned to me. He said you're lying about his income. He claimed he had a great salary. I sighed. He's a salesman. He gets incentives when he makes a big sale, but most of the time, he only gets the minimum guaranteed salary. He brags about his income, but the truth is, it's nowhere near enough to pay for something like this. Millie wasn't impressed. Don't tell me you're planning to pay for this out of savings, she said, looking at him sharply. No way, I said before he could speak. That money is for divorce costs, child support, and alimony. What are you talking about? My husband snapped, his voice rising. I filed for divorce, I said, standing tall. You've been threatening me with divorce for years, remember? You always said you'd divorce me anytime. Well, I finally did it. I submitted the papers as fast as I could. He looked stunned. Wait, what? You're serious?
Yes.
And since we're not married anymore, I don't owe you anything. Not now, not ever. My husband had no choice but to promise Millie he would pay the hotel bill in installments. After that, I contacted an attorney to formally file for custody of my daughter, child support, and alimony. I packed up our belongings and took my daughter back to my parents' house, where we started fresh. Ironically, one of the regular guests at Millie's hotel was an executive from my husband's company. When he found out about the situation, he ordered my ex-husband to pay the full hotel bill immediately. As for my mother-in-law, she was furious when she discovered how little her son earned. She called me, begging me to reconsider the divorce. She wanted her son to support her in the future and couldn't believe I had actually left him. My ex-husband also called me, insisting that Jane needed a father and that we should remarry. I ignored him. Now, my daughter and I are happily living with my parents. Jane is smiling more than ever, and I feel free for the first time in years. There's no way I'm going back to that life. I don't even know what my ex-husband is talking about anymore. He says our daughter needs him, but he never really took care of her anyway. After the divorce, he moved back into his mother's house. At work, things aren't going well for him either. He's not a good planner, so he waited until the last minute to apply for vacation time for that trip. On top of that, the company executive found out that he couldn't even pay for the hotel. Now, his performance and financial issues are common knowledge at work, and he's feeling embarrassed and small. Meanwhile, my life is finally moving in the right direction. Next weekend, my daughter and I are going to stay at the same hotel Millie runs. It's nice to have something to look forward to, especially since I've also started a new job. It's been years since I last worked, but going back to work has been so fulfilling. It's nothing like the draining and one-sided marriage I had. I feel productive and free, building a better future for myself and my daughter. I used to think it was better for children to grow up with both parents under the same roof, but I've learned that's not always true. In our case, it was far better to leave. What really matters is having happy parents who can raise their children in a healthy environment. This divorce has taught me so much. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The most important lesson I've learned is that my daughter will always be my first priority. No matter what challenges come our way, I know I'll always do my best for her. With her by my side, I feel like I can take on anything. She's my biggest source of strength and happiness. Her smile reminds me every day that I made the right decision by walking away from a toxic marriage. I sometimes wonder where people like my ex-husband get their confidence from. He acts so entitled and sure of himself, even when he's clearly in the wrong. Maybe it's just a front to hide his insecurities. Either way, it doesn't matter to me anymore. The divorce was the best decision I've ever made. It gave me the freedom to rebuild my life and give my daughter a better future. Now I can honestly say I'm happy. I'm grateful for my daughter, my supportive friends like Millie, and the second chance I've been given. I hope for a peaceful and happy life for the two of us from now on. My daughter deserves nothing less, and I'll make sure she has the love, security, and support she needs to thrive.
The scent of betrayal hung in the air, thick as the summer humidity. I stood frozen, my hand clutching the steering wheel, as I watched my husband Max step out of the unfamiliar red sedan. A woman with long, dark hair emerged from the passenger side, her laughter carrying across the parking lot. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, my heart pounding in my chest. Max leaned in, kissing the woman on the cheek before they parted ways. I ducked down in my seat, praying he wouldn't notice me as he walked towards his own car. As soon as Max drove away, I started my engine and followed the red sedan. My mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. Who was she? How long had this been going on? I trailed the car to a modest apartment complex across town. The woman, still oblivious to my presence, disappeared inside. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend, Alice. "Emma, what's wrong?" Alice's concerned voice came through the speaker. "I think Max is cheating on me," I blurted out, my voice cracking. "Oh, honey, where are you?" I gave her the address, and within minutes, Alice's familiar blue hatchback pulled up beside me. "Get in," she said, her face a mask of determination. "You shouldn't be alone right now." As we drove back to my house, I recounted what I'd seen. Alice listened intently, her grip on the steering wheel tightening with each detail. "That bastard!" she muttered. "Emma, you need to confront him." I shook my head. "I can't. What if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation?" Alice pulled into my driveway and turned to face me. "Sweetie, you saw what you saw. Don't let him gaslight you." Just then, Max's car turned onto our street. Alice squeezed my hand. "You've got this. Call me later, okay?" I nodded, climbing out of her car just as Max pulled up. He looked surprised to see me home early. "Hey, Em, everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed in what seemed like genuine concern. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk, Max." Inside, I paced the living room, while Max sat on the couch, watching me with growing unease. "Where were you this afternoon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "At work, like always. Why?" The lie hit me like a physical blow. "Don't. I saw you, Max, with her." His face paled. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "How you were kissing another woman? How you've been lying to me?" Max stood up, reaching for me. "It's not what you think. Carol's just a friend." "Carol?" I repeated, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. "So she has a name." "Emma, please, let me explain." The doorbell interrupted us. I moved to answer it, grateful for the distraction. As I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman I'd never seen before. She was older, probably in her late 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Mrs. Reynolds?" she asked. I nodded, confused. I'm Daisy Reynolds, Max's mother, she said, her voice clipped. I think it's time we had a little chat about my son. I glanced back at Max, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. As I stepped aside to let Daisy in, I realized that my world was about to be turned upside down even more than I'd thought possible. The tension in the room was palpable as Daisy strode in, her eyes darting between Max and me. Whatever she had come to say, I had a feeling it would change everything. And as I closed the door behind her, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that my once blissful marriage was about to crumble before my eyes. The days following Daisy's unexpected visit were a blur of tension and unspoken accusations. Max had managed to deflect his mother's concerns, but her words lingered in the air like a toxic fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than I knew. One morning, as I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital, I noticed Max's phone buzzing on the nightstand. He was in the shower, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, my heart racing as I saw the name Carol flash across the screen. Before I could think twice, I unlocked his phone. He'd never changed the passcode from my birthday. What I saw made my blood run cold. Dozens of messages, each more intimate than the last, scrolled before my eyes. I miss you. One read, can't wait to see you again, said another. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking. Everything okay, Em? Max asked as he came out, towel around his waist. I forced a smile. Fine, just running late. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying those messages, imagining Max with Carol. During my lunch break, I called Alice. I need your help, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What's wrong? Alice's concern was palpable. I saw messages on Max's phone, from her, from Carol. Alice's sharp intake of breath told me everything. Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. What do I do, Alice? I can't confront him without admitting I snooped. You need proof, Alice said firmly. Concrete evidence. Can you check his call logs? That night, I waited until Max was asleep before carefully examining his phone again. The call logs were a damning testament to his betrayal, daily calls to Carol, often lasting hours. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own home. I noted Max's late nights at the office, his sudden work trips, the way he guarded his phone. Each discovery was a knife to my heart, but I needed to be sure. Then came the night that changed everything. Max said he had a late meeting, but something in his voice made me suspicious. I followed him, my heart pounding as I trailed his car across town. He pulled up to a small Italian restaurant, and there she was, Carol, waiting outside. I watched as they embraced, kissed, and went inside, oblivious to my presence. Through the window, I could see them laughing, holding hands across the table. The intimacy of it all made me sick to my stomach. I took out my phone with trembling hands and snapped a few pictures, tears blurring my vision. As I sat in my car staring at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, my phone buzzed. It was Alice. Emma, where are you? I stopped by your house and you weren't there. I couldn't hold back the sobs any longer. He's with her, Alice. I'm watching them right now. Oh, honey, stay where you are. I'm coming to get you. Alice arrived within minutes, her face a mask of concern and anger. She climbed into my car, wrapping me in a fierce hug. What do you want to do? She asked gently. I took a deep breath, wiping away my tears. I want to confront him, tonight. Alice nodded, her eyes steely with determination. Then that's what we'll do. You're not alone in this, Emma. As we drove home, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but now it was mixed with something else. Resolve. We pulled into my driveway just as Max's car turned onto our street. Alice squeezed my hand. Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who broke your trust. I nodded, stepping out of the car. As Max approached, his face registered surprise, then alarm at the sight of Alice and my tear-stained face. Emma? What's going on? He asked, his voice wavering. I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. We need to talk, Max, about Carol. The color drained from his face, and I knew in that moment that everything was about to change. The life I thought I knew was crumbling around me, but as I stood there, with Alice by my side and the truth finally out in the open, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected. Hope. The confrontation with Max left me emotionally drained, but it didn't provide the closure I'd hoped for. He'd apologized, promised to end things with Carol, and begged for another chance. I wanted to believe him, but the trust was shattered. A week later, I found myself sitting in my car, outside Max's office, my heart pounding. He'd told me he was working late, but something in his voice had set off alarm bells. "You don't have to do this." Alice's voice crackled through my phone's speaker. I took a deep breath. "I need to know, Alice. I can't live with the uncertainty anymore." As if on cue, Max emerged from the building. He wasn't alone. Carol was by his side, her hand on his arm. They walked to his car, laughing and talking intimately. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, snapping pictures as they got into Max's car and drove away. I followed at a distance, my mind racing. They pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Hotel downtown. I watched as they walked inside, Max's hand on the small of Carol's back. "Alice," I choked out, "they're at a hotel." "Oh, Emma?" Alice's voice was filled with sympathy and anger. "Do you want me to come get you?" "No," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I need to see this through." I waited in the lobby, my heart in my throat, for nearly 2 hours. When Max and Carol finally emerged, they were disheveled and giddy, oblivious to my presence. I stepped out from behind a large potted plant, my phone raised. "Smile for the camera, lovebirds." The flash went off, capturing their shocked expressions perfectly. "Emma!" Max's face drained of color. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my voice ice-cold. "But I think the answer's pretty obvious, isn't it?" Carol had the decency to look ashamed, but Max's expression quickly morphed from shock to anger. "You followed me," he hissed. "What gives you the right?" "What gives me the right?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "I'm your wife, Max, or have you forgotten that little detail while you've been busy screwing around?" People in the lobby were starting to stare, but I didn't care. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. "I trusted you," I continued, tears streaming down my face. "I believed you when you said you'd end it. How could you do this to me, to us?" Max reached for me, his face a mask of regret. "Emma, please, let's not do this here. We can talk about this at home." I stepped back, out of his reach. "There's nothing left to talk about, Max. We're done." I turned to Carol, who looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "He's all yours. I hope you're happy together." As I walked away, Max called after me, but I didn't turn back. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. "Do you need me?" "Yes," I replied, my vision blurry with tears. "Can you meet me at home? I don't think I should be alone right now." By the time I got home, Alice was already there, waiting on my porch with a bottle of wine and a fierce, protective look in her eyes. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug as soon as I stepped out of the car. "I'm so sorry." We sat on the porch swing, passing the bottle back and forth as I recounted what had happened. As I talked, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was a new feeling: determination. "What are you going to do now?" Alice asked gently. I took a deep breath, looking out at the neighborhood I'd called home for so long. "I'm going to file for divorce," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "And then I'm going to start over." Alice squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." As we sat there, the sun setting on my old life, I felt a strange mix of grief and hope. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story. The morning after my confrontation with Max at the hotel, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Alice's words from the night before echoed in my mind. "You need to protect yourself, Emma, legally and emotionally." I called in sick to work and spent the morning researching divorce lawyers. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled with Patricia Lawson, a highly recommended attorney known for her no-nonsense approach. As I was about to leave for the appointment, the doorbell rang. My heart sank when I saw Daisy, Max's mother, standing on the porch. "Emma," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "we need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Daisy had never been my biggest fan, and I braced myself for an onslaught of accusations. To my surprise, she sat down on the couch and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I had no idea Max was capable of this." I felt my defenses crumbling. You believe me?" Daisy nodded, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I found these in Max's old room at our house. I think you should see them." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Max with Carol, dating back years. My world tilted on its axis as I realized the depth of his betrayal. How long? I whispered. Based on the dates, at least 5 years, Daisy replied, her voice heavy with regret. 5 years, half of our marriage. I felt like I was going to be sick. I confronted Max, Daisy continued. He tried to lie at first, but, well, the evidence was irrefutable. Emma, I want you to know that I'm on your side in this. Whatever you need, I'm here. I looked at her, stunned by this unexpected alliance. Thank you, Daisy. That means more than you know. After Daisy left, I called Alice in a daze. Can you come with me to see the lawyer? I asked. I don't think I can do this alone. Alice arrived just in time, and we drove to Patricia Lawson's office together. As I recounted my story to the lawyer, showing her the photographs Daisy had provided, I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. Mrs. Morrison, Patricia said, her voice firm but kind, based on what you've told me, you have a very strong case for divorce. But I need to ask, are you sure this is what you want? I took a deep breath, feeling Alice's supportive hand on my arm. Yes, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. I'm sure. As we left the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Max. We need to talk. Please come home. I showed Alice the message, my hands shaking. What should I do? Alice's eyes flashed with protective anger. You don't owe him anything, Emma, but if you want closure, maybe this is your chance. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. Will you come with me? Of course, Alice replied. I'll be right there with you. As we drove to the house I once shared with Max, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I wasn't alone. Max was waiting on the porch when we arrived. His face fell when he saw Alice, but I cut him off before he could protest. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Alice, I said firmly. Max's shoulders slumped in defeat. Emma, I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you beyond forgiveness, but please, can we try to work this out? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved, the life we had built together, it all seemed like a distant dream now. No, Max, I said, my voice steady. We can't. I've spoken to a lawyer. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, final and irrevocable. As I watched the reality of our situation sink into Max's face, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't the end I had ever imagined for us, but standing there with Alice by my side and the truth finally out in the open, I knew it was the beginning of something new. A life that was truly my own. The day I decided to leave, Max dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. Alice had helped me pack my essentials the night before, and now we stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes and memories. Are you sure about this, Emma? Alice asked, her eyes filled with concern. I nodded, my throat tight. I have to do this, for myself. Just then, the front door opened, and Max walked in. He froze when he saw the boxes, his face a mask of confusion and fear. Emma? What's going on? He asked, his voice trembling. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I'm leaving, Max. I can't do this anymore. His face crumpled. But we can work this out. I promise I'll change. It's too late. I cut him off, my voice surprisingly steady. I know about Carol. I know it's been going on for years. Max's face drained of color. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know, I said, fighting back tears. What matters is that you've been lying to me for half of our marriage. As the reality of the situation sank in, Max's demeanor changed. His eyes hardened, and a cruel smirk twisted his lips. Fine, he spat, if that's how you want it. But don't think you're going to take me for everything I'm worth. I've got friends in high places, Emma. You'll be lucky if you walk away with anything. His words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the man I'd married. The man I'd loved for so long. It was like looking at a stranger. Alice stepped forward, her voice cold. I think you should leave, Max. Now. He glared at her, then at me. This isn't over, he growled before storming out, slamming the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, my knees gave out. Alice caught me, guiding me to the couch. Oh, Emma, she murmured, holding me as I sobbed. I'm so sorry. When I finally calmed down, I looked up at Alice, a new determination in my eyes. I need to talk to Carol. Alice's eyes widened. Are you sure that's a good idea? I nodded. I need answers, and I need her to know what she's getting into. It took some digging, but we managed to find Carol's address. My heart pounded as we pulled up to her apartment building. Do you want me to come with you? Alice asked. I shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. Carol's face when she opened the door was a mix of shock and guilt. Emma, what are you doing here? We need to talk, I said, pushing past her into the apartment. For the next hour, I laid everything out, the years of deception, the pain, the betrayal. To my surprise, Carol listened, her face growing more horrified with each revelation. I had no idea, she whispered when I finished. He told me you were separated, that you were cruel and cold. I'm so sorry, Emma. Her words should have brought me comfort, but instead they just made me feel hollow. He's all yours now, I said, standing to leave. But be careful. The Max you think you know, he doesn't exist. As I walked out of Carol's apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Max. I'm sorry. Please come home. We can fix this. I stared at the screen, a war raging inside me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to go back to the life I thought we had, but the larger part, the part that had been growing stronger with each revelation, knew there was no going back. With shaking hands, I typed out my response, No, Max, we can't. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally on the right path. I looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. It was time to start my new life, on my own terms. The hospital corridors felt different that morning. Whispers followed me, and colleagues averted their eyes. I tried to focus on my work, but an undercurrent of tension made it impossible. As I was changing an IV bag, Carol's voice cut through the air like a knife. Emma Morrison! I turned to see her storming towards me, her face contorted with rage. Patients and staff alike stopped to stare. Can I help you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You ruined everything, Carol shrieked. Max lost his job because of you. My heart raced. What are you talking about? Carol's laugh was bitter. Don't play innocent. You told his office about us, didn't you? They fired him this morning. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't tell anyone. Liar. Carol lunged at me, her nails raking across my cheek. Everything happened in a blur. Security guards appeared, restraining Carol as she continued to scream accusations. My supervisor, Dr. Patel, pulled me aside. Emma, what's going on? She asked, her eyes filled with concern. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I possibly untangle this mess? Dr. Patel sighed. I think you should go home, Emma. Take a few days off. But my patients... We'll cover your shifts, she said firmly. This situation, it's become a distraction. We need to sort this out before you can return. I felt like I was drowning. Am I being fired? No, not fired, but suspended, pending an investigation. I'm sorry, Emma. I stumbled out of the hospital in a daze. My phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls from Max, texts from Alice asking if I was okay. I ignored them all. When I got home, I found Max waiting on the porch. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes disheveled. What have you done, Emma? He asked, his voice breaking. I pushed past him into the house. I didn't do anything, Max. This is all you're doing. He followed me inside. My doing? You're the one who told my office about the affair. They fired me, Emma. My career is ruined. I never told your office anything. I shot back. Maybe you should ask your girlfriend about that. Max's face crumpled. Carol? She wouldn't. Wouldn't she? She showed up at my work today, Max. She attacked me in front of everyone. I've been suspended. The reality of the situation hit us both like a tidal wave. We stood there, two people who had once promised to love each other forever, now reduced to this. What are we going to do? Max whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but exhaustion. There is no we anymore, Max. You need to leave. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Alice. Emma, are you okay? I heard what happened at the hospital. I felt the last of my composure crumble. Alice, I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. I'm coming over, she said firmly. Don't do anything until I get there. I hung up and turned to Max. You need to be gone by the time Alice arrives. He nodded, defeated. As he walked out the door, he paused. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. In the span of a few hours, I'd lost my job, been publicly humiliated, and watched the last vestiges of my marriage crumble to dust. As I sat there waiting for Alice, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was a new feeling, a fierce determination. I'd hit rock bottom, but I refused to stay there. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: I was done being a victim. It was time to take control of my life, no matter the cost. The days following the hospital incident blurred together in a haze of anxiety and sleepless nights. I was trapped in my own home, afraid to face the world outside. Alice had become my lifeline, bringing groceries and updates from the outside world. It was Alice who brought me the news that would change everything. "Emma," she said, her voice gentle but urgent, "you need to see this." She handed me her tablet, open to a local news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Local executive fired over affair scandal. Wife accused of sabotage. As I read the article, my hands began to shake. It detailed Max's firing, painting me as a vengeful wife who had orchestrated his downfall. Worse still, it mentioned my suspension from the hospital, implying I was unstable and potentially dangerous. "This is insane," I whispered. "How can they print this?" Alice's eyes flashed with anger. "It gets worse. Look at the comments." I scrolled down, feeling sick as I read the vitriol directed at me. Strangers calling me a liar, a cheat, a homewrecker. My reputation was being shredded before my eyes. Just then, my phone rang. It was Dr. Patel from the hospital. "Emma," she said, her voice strained, "I'm sorry, but given the recent publicity, we're going to have to let you go." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "But I didn't do anything wrong," I protested weakly. "I know, but the board feels your presence would be disruptive. I'm truly sorry." As I hung up, feeling numb, Alice squeezed my hand. "We're not going to let them get away with this," she said firmly. "It's time to fight back." With Alice's encouragement, I made an appointment with Patricia Lawson, the divorce lawyer. As we sat in her office, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Mrs. Morrison," Patricia said, her eyes sharp, "based on what you've told me, we have a strong case for defamation. But I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? This could get ugly." I took a deep breath, thinking of everything I'd lost: my marriage, my job, my reputation. "I'm ready," I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. "I want my life back." Patricia nodded, a hint of a smile on her face. "Then let's get to work." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal documents and strategy sessions. We filed for divorce, citing Max's infidelity, and prepared a countersuit against the newspaper for defamation. Just as I was starting to feel like I was regaining control, the final blow came. I was leaving Patricia's office when I saw them, Max and Carol, walking hand in hand down the street. They looked happy, carefree, as if the chaos they'd caused didn't matter at all. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I was marching towards them. "How dare you?" I hissed, my voice shaking with rage. "How dare you act like nothing's wrong when you've ruined my life?" Max's face paled. "Emma, Save it," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you to know that I'm done being your victim. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win." Carol sneered. "Good luck with that. Who's going to believe you over Max?" I felt a surge of determination. "The truth will come out," I said, my voice steady. "And when it does, you'll both regret ever crossing me." As I walked away, leaving them stunned on the sidewalk, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt truly alive. Back at home, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers and newspaper clippings. My hands shook as I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. It was time to call in reinforcements, time to tell my story, on my terms. As the phone rang, I took a deep breath. This was it. The point of no return. Whatever happened next would define the rest of my life. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. "Daisy," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's Emma. We need to talk." The courtroom fell silent as I took the stand. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice remained steady as I recounted the painful journey of the past few months. Max's betrayal, Carol's vindictive actions, the loss of my job and reputation. I laid it all bare. As I spoke, I caught sight of Daisy in the audience. Her face, once so judgmental, now showed a mix of sorrow and support. Our conversation weeks ago had changed everything. "He's my son," she had said, "but what he did to you was unforgivable. I'll testify on your behalf." Her testimony, along with the evidence we'd gathered, had been damning. Now, as I finished my statement, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The judge's verdict came swiftly. The defamation case against the newspaper was successful, and Max was ordered to pay substantial alimony. But more importantly, my name was cleared. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. Alice, ever protective, shielded me from their questions. But I paused, realizing this was my chance to reclaim my narrative. "I want to make a statement," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. Facing the cameras, I took a deep breath. "To anyone who's ever felt powerless in the face of betrayal, I want you to know, you're not alone. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone silence you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. With the settlement money, I was able to start fresh. I found a new apartment, applied for nursing positions at different hospitals, and even enrolled in a writing course, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to pursue. One sunny afternoon, as I was unpacking boxes in my new place, there was a knock at the door. It was Daisy, holding a small potted plant. "A housewarming gift," she said, a tentative smile on her face, "and an apology for everything." I invited her in, surprised by how natural it felt. As we sat drinking tea, Daisy opened up about her own past, a failed marriage, the struggles of single motherhood. For the first time, I saw her not as Max's mother or my former adversary, but as a woman who'd faced her own battles. "I'm proud of you, Emma," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." As Daisy left, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The pain wasn't gone. I knew it would take time to fully heal, but it no longer defined me. That evening, I sat on my new balcony, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. "Dinner tomorrow? The whole gang wants to celebrate your fresh start." I smiled, thinking of the supportive circle of friends who'd stood by me through it all. They were my chosen family now, and with them by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. As the sky turned from orange to deep purple, I pulled out the journal I'd started keeping. On a fresh page, I began to write. Today marks the beginning of my new chapter. The past few months have been the hardest of my life, but they've also shown me what I'm capable of. I've lost a lot, but I've gained something invaluable. The knowledge that I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. This is my story now, and I'm the one holding the pen. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of anticipation building inside me. Tomorrow was a new day full of possibilities, and I was ready for it. All of it. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what life threw my way, I would face it head-on, with courage and grace. Because now I knew the truth. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. And that strength, it was just the beginning.
"I'll compensate you handsomely if you can solve even one. We'll see. I'll comply with your request." Rachel, a beautiful former classmate who later became Miss Tokyo University, put me to the test with 3 challenging riddles at the middle school reunion. She sneered at me with mockery, obviously criticizing me as someone who only completed middle school, as if she didn't like me even at school. It was clear from her expression that she didn't think I had any chance. However, I apologize. I've already figured them all out. "What? Actually, you know." She froze in shock when she heard the truth about me. "What sort of prize should I request now?" "Taryn is my name. I'm a 30-year-old office worker who is completely normal. I've been back in my hometown for the first time in 15 years today." A feeling of nostalgia came in as I walked down streets that had seen significant transformation. Before I knew it, I had reached my target for the day. I haven't seen anyone since we graduated, so I suppose it's normal to feel a little anxious. I returned today because of a middle school reunion. It seems that several of the more gregarious classmates planned it, using the 15-year mark as justification. It implies that she had to be involved as well. Oh, she was Rachel, a classmate of mine in middle school. Rachel's father was the chief executive officer of a corporation that was so well known in the community that everyone knew who he was. Rachel, his daughter, was the epitome of the affluent girl. She was also intelligent, athletic, and incredibly beautiful. A lady so perfect that it was more difficult to find fault with her than to appreciate her strengths. I always thought she lived in a different universe and had nothing to do with me because of all those characteristics. For that reason, I never tried to engage with her. However, I had been perplexed by two aspects of Rachel since middle school. To start, what made her go to the same school as me? I attended a normal public middle school with no notable prestige or entrance examinations. It was strange that someone like Rachel would go to such a school, considering her stellar grades and the prestige of her family. Second, why was she so unrelenting in her criticism of me? It wasn't merely lighthearted banter. How do you even manage to score that low? She would ask scathingly. You should teach me the secret, or you're weak in addition to being a lousy student. How pitiful. She would deliberately give challenging questions that I was unable to answer, then make fun of me when I was unable to do so. However, oddly, this always occurred when no one else was around. Who knows, maybe that was her way of maintaining appearances. Furthermore, there were times when she would give me a gaze that was almost hateful. I could have just asked her why back then, but honestly, with someone so hostile, what good would it have done? Since this reunion was planned by the popular kids, it was almost certain Rachel would be there. With a mix of anxiety about her potential hostility and curiosity about her true intentions, I headed to the venue. When I stepped inside, over 20 people had already arrived, and the room was lively. Despite being a little early, this atmosphere feels nostalgic. Though I can't recognize anyone, as I scanned the room, a striking sight caught my attention. A woman surrounded by a crowd, exuding elegance that could rival a movie star. It took me a second to realize who she was, but watching her interact with the others quickly jogged my memory. Rachel, still the same. No, even more graceful now. Every move she makes feels like a scene from a drama. She still seems like someone from another world. As I thought this, Rachel noticed me. After excusing herself from the group, she approached me. Taryn, right? Long time no see. Yeah, it's been a while. Do you remember me? Rachel, right? Spotting me and coming over so suddenly. What's this about? You're as cold as ever, she said. Well, whatever. There's something I've wanted to ask you if we ever met again. Something to ask me. Yeah, near the end of middle school. Why did you suddenly stop coming to school? Hearing her question, memories from 15 years ago came rushing back to me. I didn't want to remember it, those bitter memories I had tried so hard to forget. The reason I stopped going to school near the end of middle school lay in both family circumstances and myself. My father ran a small diner in our town. It wasn't wildly successful, but it was beloved by the local regulars. Originally, my father ran the diner by himself, but when I was young, he remarried. After that, my father and my stepmother managed the business together. However, everything changed when a shopping mall opened nearby. Already struggling with declining customers, our diner was dealt a fatal blow. By the time I was in the 3rd year of middle school, my parents decided to close the diner and move back to the countryside to help my grandparents with farming. My father explained that the mall's presence had made it impossible to keep the business afloat. But a few days after they decided to close the diner, I overheard a conversation between my parents that revealed the real reason. Hey, are you sure about closing the diner? We still have loyal customers. Yeah, I wish we didn't have to close. There are people who love our food. Then why? But it's true that we're losing business. That mall will only get bigger, and when it does, we'll lose even more customers. Keeping the diner open just isn't realistic anymore. And besides, there's Taryn to think about. You're right, his episodes have been more frequent lately. I'd had a chronic condition since I was a kid. That said, it wasn't anything serious enough to require hospitalization. It was manageable as long as I took the proper medication. But by the time I reached my 3rd year of middle school, my symptoms had worsened, and I started missing school frequently. That's why moving to a more rural environment will be better. There's a good doctor there too. It's the right time to make this change. It's hard to say goodbye, but for Terrence's sake, it's the best choice. And so my family moved to the countryside right after I graduated middle school. By the end of the school year, my condition had deteriorated to the point where I stopped going to school altogether. It hit me hard when I realized I was the reason they had to close the diner. The guilt was unbearable. I couldn't bring myself to say anything to my parents, so I just cried under the covers, silently apologizing to them over and over. Because of my condition, I didn't go on to high school. I also had a younger brother at the time. He was only in his first year of middle school. I felt awful about uprooting him too and apologized constantly for dragging him into our move, but he never once complained. In fact, he went out of his way to help our parents with their work on his days off. Eventually, my brother started his own agricultural business to support the family, and now that my condition has mostly cleared up, I work there as one of his employees. That's why these memories aren't ones I like revisiting. After all the trouble I caused, I'd rather not dwell on this. I'll just dodge the question. Well, it was a mix of personal reasons. Nothing worth sharing, really. Huh. I see. I thought maybe you ran off somewhere to avoid me. So, which high school did you go to? I didn't go to high school. Oh, really? Talking to me when no one else is around and barely reacting to what I say. Some things never change, even after 15 years. To be honest, I didn't think you'd show up to the reunion. So in a way, I got lucky. What do you mean? I'm glad we got to meet again. Oh, looks like my friends are calling me. See you later. With a cold glance, Rachel briskly walked away after saying that. Glad we got to meet again. Her expression doesn't match her words, and she keeps asking me all these questions. What's she really thinking? Although Rachel's behavior bothered me, I decided it wasn't worth overthinking and chose to focus on enjoying the reunion. Fortunately, a few friends I was close to back in middle school were there, so I didn't have to spend the event as a lonely outcast. As we reminisced about old times, the conversation inevitably turned to Rachel. Apparently, she went to a prestigious high school, then got into the University of Tokyo. She even became Miss Tokyo University. Well, she was always smart, and her looks were never in question, so that's not really surprising. What is surprising, though, is how little her attitude toward me has changed. Not wanting to ruin the mood, I played along and nodded politely as they talked about her. After about 15 minutes of reminiscing about middle school stories, the group temporarily disbanded, and Rachel approached me again. Hey, can you solve this? With that, Rachel handed me 3 sheets of paper. Each one had some sort of problem written in English, German, and French. Here we go again, I thought. I'd hoped she'd grown out of this childish behavior. Back in middle school, she pulled stunts like this countless times. I couldn't tell if she was drunk on her own academic success or if she just enjoyed looking down on people less capable than herself. But every time, she challenged me with problems designed to be unsolvable for me. If I struggled or failed to solve them, the pattern was always the same. She'd mock and belittle me. As another unpleasant memory from those days flashed through my mind, Rachel smirked and spoke. If you solve even one, I'll do whatever you want. Heck, I'll even give myself to you as a reward. Ridiculous. Her condescending attitude is way too obvious, I thought, letting out a sigh. Seeing that, Rachel's expression grew even more pleased. Well, too hard for you to solve. No, I've already solved them all. The answer to the English problem is 48 kilometers per hour. The German one is 1%, and the French one is the 25th page. What? How? Don't get so flustered. Let me explain it all for you. The problem written in English described a boy driving a car from his house to a neighboring town and back. He traveled at a speed of 40 kilometers/h on the way there and 60 kilometers/h on the way back. The question was to calculate the average speed of the entire trip. You probably thought I'd just take 40 plus 60, divided by 2, and say the answer is 50 kilometers/a, didn't you? But the calculation is straightforward. Since we don't know the exact distance, let's assume the shortest common denominator, 120 kilometers, as the distance to the town. On the way there, it takes 120 40ths, which equals 3 hours. On the way back, it's 120 60ths, which equals 2 hours. Now we have enough information. The total distance is 240 kilometers, and the total time is 5 hours. Divide the distance by the time, and you get 48 kilometers/h. Next up, the German problem. Another trick question, right? The problem written in German was a probability question. It described a virus that infects 1 in 10,000 people and a test that can detect the virus with 99% accuracy. The question was, if the test result indicates that someone is infected, what is the actual probability that they are indeed infected? This one's designed to make you think the answer is 99%, right? I could already picture you mocking me if I'd said that. You just need to think in concrete numbers. Let's assume a population of 1 million. If 1 in 10,000 people is infected, that means there are 100 infected individuals in this population. With the test being 99% accurate, 99 out of those 100 infected people will correctly test positive, while 1 will incorrectly test negative. The same logic applies in reverse. Among the 999,900 uninfected people, 1% or 99,999 will be mistakenly identified as positive. Got it so far? Oh yeah, so let's break it down. The total number of people who tested positive is 99 plus 99,999, which gives us 10,098. That's our denominator. Out of these, only 99 are actually infected. Now it's just a simple division, 99/10,098, which is roughly 0.01. So the actual probability is 1%, correct? Finally, the French one. You really went out of your way to make this one tedious. The last problem, written in French, was quite simple in concept. It described a book with 1 torn page. The sum of the page numbers of the remaining intact pages was 15,000. The question was, which page was torn from the book? There wasn't much information to go on, so I started by estimating the total number of pages. I'd use the handy formula for the sum of numbers from 1 to n, which is an equals 1/2 n plus 1. I set that 15,000 is approximately equal to 1/2 n plus 1. Solving for n, I got roughly 173.04 or 174 pages. Following so far? Yes? Then it's just a matter of plugging in the numbers. If the book has 173 pages, n equals 173, so the total page sum is 15,515. Thus, the sum of the torn page numbers is 15,515 to 15,000, which equals 51. Assume the torn page is x, with its reverse side being x plus 1. Solve x plus 1 equals 51, and you get x equals 25. Since pages are always printed as pairs, front and back, the torn pages are 25 and 26. So the answer is page 25. But what if the book had 174 pages? Didn't you consider that possibility? There's no need to. If the book had 174 pages, the torn pages would be 112 and 113, based on the same calculation. However, books are bound so that odd-numbered pages are on one side and even-numbered pages are on the other. If pages 112 and 113 were torn, it would mean 2 sheets were missing, which contradicts the problem. This kind of oversight wouldn't slip past me. After finishing my explanation, Rachel stood frozen, white-eyed, as though she couldn't believe I'd solved them all. She must have been planning to humiliate me after finding out I didn't go to high school. What a pointless, childish game. As I thought about this, Rachel finally collected herself and spoke. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't think you'd solve them so quickly. Did you go to college by any chance? Yeah, which one? Harvard. At that moment, I could tell not just Rachel, but everyone around us had started murmuring in shock. Well, I did tell them I didn't go to high school, so it's only natural they'd be a bit surprised. What followed was an onslaught of questions from everyone, far more than I'd anticipated. The reunion eventually ended in a flurry of activity. Though I was invited to the after-party, I declined because I had unfinished business to attend to. I stayed behind at the reunion venue, and so did Rachel. In fact, as the others left to head to the after-party, I intentionally stopped Rachel from leaving. The reason? To uncover the truth behind her attitude toward me. Once I confirmed we were alone, I turned to her and spoke. Do you remember what you said earlier? Huh. What was it about again? Don't play dumb. You were the one who said it. If I solved even one problem, you'd do whatever I asked. I have no idea what you're talking about. What a conveniently selective memory you've got. Hard to believe you graduated from Tokyo University. What did you just say? I'm just stating facts. I'll ask you one last time. Do you remember what you said earlier? With a deep sigh, Rachel finally responded. Yes, I remember. I didn't think you'd take it so seriously, but fine, do whatever you want. With that, she closed her eyes as if resigning herself to whatever was coming. You're misunderstanding something. It's not going to be anything like what you're imagining. Then what is it? Why did you stop me from leaving? It's simple. Why were you so insistent on pestering me, not just in middle school, but even today? At last, I asked the question that had been nagging at me for years. Rachel's taunting demeanor from earlier disappeared. She fell silent, refusing to answer. What are you going to say? You don't have a reason. Why does it even matter to you? Seeing that this was going nowhere, I decided to answer her question first. I explained why I'd stopped attending school. Family circumstances, the worsening of my chronic condition, and how the exacerbation of that condition was linked to harassment I'd experienced at school, thanks to you constantly picking on me in middle school. One of your so-called admirers among the upperclassmen decided to target me. That's when the daily harassment began. I continued my story. I explained how the harassment escalated day by day. On top of that, Rachel's persistent pestering wore me down mentally, little by little. Combined with the worsening of my chronic condition, I eventually reached the point where I couldn't bring myself to go to school anymore. That's everything. Now you should have enough context to explain your blatant hostility toward me. Your turn. Answer my question now. Ha ha. Before I could finish, Rachel suddenly burst into laughter as if she'd had some sort of epiphany. What's so funny? Have you lost your mind? Oh, I see now. Fine, I'll answer your question then. Rachel began to explain why she'd been so fixated on me. Her actions, she said, weren't out of admiration or anything positive. They stemmed from resentment. She revealed that her hostility toward me was motivated by revenge for something she believed I'd taken from her mother. I don't get it. That doesn't make any sense. I've never done anything like that. Shut up and listen. Rachel continued her story. One day, she saw her mother visiting my father's diner. The two of them were chatting so intimately that it was obvious their relationship wasn't just platonic. Soon after, Rachel discovered the shocking truth. Her mother had married my father. Well, things are getting complicated, I said. I didn't know much about my mother's past, but this is unexpected. I get why you kept pestering me now. You ruined my family, and that's all you have to say. But I guess your chronic illness worsening and keeping you from high school was just karma. Maybe that was divine punishment. With that, Rachel picked up her things and quickly left the venue. I understand the story now, but it doesn't sit right with me. The remarriage was my parents' decision, not mine. This so-called revenge of hers is entirely misplaced, I thought. As I mulled over the situation, I wandered through the now empty venue. So that's what she meant by, "I'm glad we could meet again at the reunion." It seemed I'd been harboring resentment without even knowing it. Her saying, "I ruined her family," didn't seem to make sense. Judging by how my parents seemed, it didn't look like it was some kind of home-wrecking situation. The whole thing felt tangled. Countless possibilities raced through my mind, but I knew that keeping it all to myself wouldn't help the situation move forward. I decided to head home, leaving the now empty venue behind. The sun had long set, and the lonely sound of cicadas echoed through the night as I made my way back. When I got home, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to talk to my parents about what Rachel had told me. "So that's the story," I began. "Seems like I've been on the receiving end of some misplaced resentment. That girl. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have noticed something was wrong. It's not your fault, Mom. Nobody could have anticipated something like this. It's partly my fault, too. I should have paid closer attention. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. That's not why I brought it up. But Rachel's story still sticks with me. Is what she said true?" "Oh, that. I was planning to tell you about it at some point, but there's a bit of a misunderstanding in her version." "Yes, there's more to it." "A misunderstanding?" "Yeah, let me explain." My parents then told me the truth. After hearing their side of the story, I lay back on the floor, staring at the ceiling. I guess I need to let Rachel know, don't I? I thought. I had a feeling this might lead to more trouble, but I couldn't just keep it to myself. So I decided to meet with Rachel and tell her the truth on another day. Having made the decision, the next challenge was that I didn't have her contact information. With the help of a middle school friend and some effort, I managed to set up a meeting with Rachel about a week later. A week later, I arrived at the cafe a bit early to pass the time, and soon I spotted Rachel approaching from a distance with an unmistakably irritated expression. "Well, someone's in a bad mood today." "Of course I am. Do you think I'd be thrilled to be called out by you?" "Wow, you really don't hold back, huh?" "Shut up. So, what's this about my misunderstanding at the reunion? You mentioned my father's remarriage." Afterward, I spoke with my parents, and it turns out the truth is a little different from what you think. "What do you mean?" "Don't worry, I'll explain everything in order." I then relayed the story my parents had told me. The reason my father and Rachel's mother remarried was that Rachel's father had thrown her mother out of the house, leaving her with nowhere to go. My father did that. It's not a pleasant story, I know. Want me to stop? No, keep going. Noticing the change in her demeanor, I continued. Rachel's father had been obsessed with having a male heir to take over his business. When it was discovered that Rachel's mother was infertile, they struggled for years to have children. Eventually, after undergoing extensive fertility treatments, she became pregnant only to give birth to a girl. Her father, enraged that she hadn't produced a son, expelled Rachel's mother from the family. "So, my mother disappeared because I was born?" Rachel asked. "There's no need to blame yourself. That's something entirely out of your control." "I know, but still. Do you want me to stop here?" "No. I want to hear everything." "You don't look like you're holding up well," I said. The elegant, composed Rachel I saw at the reunion was nowhere to be found. But it's better for you to know the full story, even if it hurts, than to live with half-truths. All right, if you insist. Understanding Rachel's need for clarity, I shared everything my parents had told me without holding back. First, I explained that Rachel's father had never truly loved her mother. After their separation, he only took Rachel in for the sake of appearances. Her mother left penniless and wandering. Eventually, she met my father by chance, and the two remarried. Ironically, after their remarriage, they had a son, my younger brother, and their life has continued since then. That's it. As harsh as it is, that's the truth. That can't be true. Rachel cried, still unable to fully process the truth. She showed visible signs of distress. Of course, hearing this would be a shock. Anyone would be shaken to their core. If I were in her shoes, I might have passed out on the spot. Suddenly, Rachel stood up and began staggering toward the exit. Hey, what's wrong? Sorry, I just need to be alone for a bit. With that, Rachel quietly left the cafe. I always thought she lived in a completely different world, but even someone like her has struggles and pain. It's obvious when you think about it. But still, maybe the way she acted toward me in middle school was her way of avoiding the reality. Would things have been different if I talked to her properly back then? Not that it matters now. After reflecting for a moment, I finished my coffee and left the cafe. I wandered the neighborhood for a while, but I couldn't shake the image of Rachel's face after hearing the truth. I thought telling her the truth would give me some closure, but it just left a bad taste in my mouth. Unable to bring myself to return home, that night I decided to stay at a nearby hotel. After checking in at the front desk and entering my room, I noticed a message on my phone. To my surprise, it was from Rachel. The message said she had something she wanted to talk about and asked if we could meet somewhere soon. She didn't specify what she wanted to talk about. Maybe she's planning to get back at me. Judging by the tone, though, it seems like she sorted through her thoughts a bit. Either way, I've got no reason not to go. Curious about what she wanted to discuss, I arranged to meet Rachel again 2 days later. When the day came, I arrived early once more, relaxing with a cup of coffee. I noticed Rachel walking toward me from the entrance, looking slightly awkward and uneasy. She's really wearing her emotions on her sleeve again. Was she always this easy to read? I'd wondered. As soon as Rachel sat down, she bowed her head deeply toward me. I'm so sorry for all the terrible things I've done to you. Whoa, where's this coming from all of a sudden? After our last talk, I couldn't fully accept what you told me. Honestly, I thought it might be a lie, but after doing my own research, I found out everything you said was true. Of course it's true. I wouldn't make up something like that. I'm truly sorry I treated you so horribly, all because of my own selfish assumptions. Well, yeah, but if you're apologizing sincerely now, that's enough for me. We're taught in elementary school that when we do something wrong, we say sorry. Hearing that from you is enough. I'm not going to hold it against you anymore. You're really such a good person, after all the awful things I've done to you. That's in the past now. More importantly, what are you going to do from here? Now that you know the truth, are you still planning to stay in that house? No. Actually, I've decided to leave home, and I've already quit my father's company. Well, that sounds like a solid decision. Yeah, and again, I'm truly sorry. I know I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I just had to tell you directly. That's all I wanted to say. As Rachel stood to leave, I quickly called out to her. What? What is it? Oh, sorry. Sorry. There's something I want to talk to you about too. Something you want to talk about. You said you quit the company, right? Do you have another job lined up? Oh, no, not yet. Perfect timing then. Why don't you come work at my company? I could really use someone like you. What? Hearing my offer, Rachel froze, her expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. This isn't about forgiving you for what you've done. It's just that, in a way, you're a victim too. You got caught up in the selfish actions of the adults around you, and it destroyed your sense of stability. That earns a bit of sympathy, that's all there is to it. So you don't have to decide right now, but think it over. Tears suddenly began streaming down Rachel's face as she quietly spoke. Honestly, how can you be so kind? Why? Why would you go out of your way for someone like me? You don't owe me anything. You're giving me way too much credit. I'm not some noble person. Thank you, but why me? Stop putting yourself down. It doesn't help. The reason is simple. I think you're talented. Isn't that enough? Yes, it is. I'll gratefully accept your offer. And so, Rachel began working at the company my brother and I had started together. It turned out my instincts were spot on. Rachel's work lived up to her Tokyo University credentials, and ever since she joined, our company's performance has skyrocketed. Around the same time, her father's company suffered a significant downturn. Rumor had it that Rachel's departure had dealt an even bigger blow to the company than anyone had anticipated. How ironic. The daughter he took in solely for appearances was the one propping up his company. If he'd paid more attention to those around him, things might have turned out differently. Then again, knowing him, he probably wouldn't have changed. Not that it matters to me anymore. Meanwhile, Rachel reconciled with her mother, and now she occasionally comes over to our house to share meals with us. As for my brother, while their blood relation made things a bit awkward at first, they've since grown to be close siblings. Just the other day, at Rachel's request for dessert, the two of them went to an all-you-can-eat sweets buffet. They joked and laughed about how often they're mistaken for a couple whenever they go out together. So much has happened, really. So much. Up until recently, our impressions of each other couldn't have been worse. But people make mistakes, and as long as they're willing to acknowledge them and take a step forward, life can turn out better than you'd ever imagine. Watching the smiles on Rachel and my family's faces, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd all come.